Hello, and welcome back to Black River Paranormal Investigations. I am your host, Rich Hardway, and this is episode 2. Before we start this video, I'd like to encourage you to give it a like and subscribe so you can follow along as I walk you through a lifetime of paranormal experiences. In episode 1, I kind of gave an introduction to the first time that I ever even heard of someone having psychic ability. So I'd like to move forward from that and tell you about the time that I first began to experience some sort of psychic ability. I'm going to call this the dreams. So when I'm in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, I start having dreams that came true. I had the dreams before what I dreamed about became reality. And I always would wake up and tell my mom as we're going to school that morning what I dreamed about. And then maybe that day, maybe 2-3 days later, the dream would come true. I'm going to use 2 as an example of such. The first one I recall, I'm in 7th grade and I'm in a private Baptist church school that went from kindergarten to 12th grade. I'm in 7th grade and I have this dream that 7 people were in a car wreck, a very severe car wreck. People are hurt very bad. I name the car and I name all 7 of the people that was in the car. These kids were much older than me. They were more like, I'm going to say 10th grade at the youngest, up to 12th graders. When I get to school that morning, I learn that there's been a car wreck. The 7 kids that I told my mom had been in this wreck were indeed the 7 people who was in the car at the time it was wrecked. It was the correct car, and I named the person who owned the car. When I came home from school that day, I told my mom that my dream had come true, that these people were, and we're talking broken legs, bad cuts on the face, and one kid was scarred for the rest of his life. You know, this was everything I dreamed about had come true. Later that year, like that happened, and then I'm in 8th grade. I'm still in that same school, but I'm in 8th grade now, the start of the school year, if you will, the fall. I dreamed about a funeral. I described the casket, what was above the casket. I described the curtains, the carpeting, the wall coverings. All this came to me in a dream. And when I woke up that morning and I'm getting ready for school, having breakfast, the drive to school, my mom and she drove me to school because there was no busing to this little private school that I went to. And that was a lot of times that we would talk, and so I'm telling her about this dream that I had and how it kind of upset me. The one thing I didn't know or didn't dream about was whose funeral was it. The only mistake in that dream that I had made was, instead of being at a funeral parlor, which always kind of looked like a house, right? It looks like your living room with a bunch of chairs in it. In my dream, It was our living room in the house I was living at with my parents. But with that said, the carpeting was correct, the walls were correct, the casket was correct, the pictures on the wall and above the casket were correct in my dream to the reality. The casket was exactly the way I talked about it, dark brown with gold trim. I can remember the corners of the casket being like gold colored, maybe brass, but big, wide, bold. 3 days later, after I'd had that dream and told it all to my mom, one of my uncles was in that funeral home and in that casket. And my mom looked at me when we had come home from the first wake that we went to, and she said, "How did you know?" I didn't know. I didn't know who was in it. I didn't know who had passed away. A very involved uncle who we spent a lot of time with and was very close family. My third dream, around the same time, I think I'm in ninth grade, is I have this dream that a friend of the family had wrecked a motorcycle. And again, I share my dream. This time, I don't know if I shared with this one with my mom or not, but I shared it with my dad because I was raised on dirt bikes out in the country, riding through the woods, crossing the river, and running through farmers' fields. And anyway, I told my dad about the accident, and he just kind of wrote it off with, no one can explain dreams or why we dream. But 2 days after having that dream, this person did have this accident, and they weren't killed. They were injured, but they weren't killed or nothing. So it's interesting how when we're asleep that our mind opens up and we can receive these types of dreams. I've gone on and had many dreams throughout my lifetime of the such. This would be a 12-hour video if I was to go through them all, but the point of this video or this podcast was to introduce you to when I realized that I started receiving things that most people probably never receive. That these were documented dreams by sharing them with my parents that came true. And we've all had probably a lot of dreams. People pass away and they come and visit you in a dream. I have that. I'll talk about that at another podcast later. I'm going to combine a couple of those, share with you. But I just wonder how many other people might have had dreams that came true like that, especially as a youth. I think we're more susceptible to taking in when we're a youth than we are as an adult. Anyway, I hope you hit the like and subscribe button on the podcast and that you'll follow along. Until next time, be safe.